hello, Fred. Great to catch up with you. It's been about a year. I can't wait to get back there, but I thought it would be really fun to talk about your wines today at Château Pesquié. But I want to start with Ventoux, with the region, the place, where it is. Can you set the stage for our viewers?
Hi, Tony. I'm very happy to be back. Well, the Ventoux is in the southeast of France, and it's part of the Rhône Valley. It's in the southeast of the Rhône Valley, at the border with Provence, but definitely on the Rhône side. And we're basically exactly at the same latitude as Châteauneuf-du-Pape, about 30 minutes east of it.
And you're multi-generational. I love that. We covet that in Canada because of that sort of information transformation between generations. So how did it start for your family in this business?
My grandparents took over Château Pesquié in the early 70s, 3 years before the area became an actual AOC. And at the time, they restructured the vineyards. They did a lot of work on the house as well. But for 20 years, my family was really growing vines and growing and producing grapes that were brought to the local cooperatives. And it's really my parents who started our own independent winery in 1990. At the time, it was one of the first 10 independent wineries really of the area. So they were pretty much pioneer. But they already had an idea that there was a lot more than people thought in the great terroir of the Ventoux. And with my brother, we've started taking over in between 2003 and 2005, and we've definitely extended that adventure and kept on trying to show that the terroir of the Ventoux is incredible.
Often, at least historically, we look at the Rhône as a place that there's a northern Rhône and a southern Rhône, and they have very distinct characteristics. But it seems to me that the Ventoux can be both because of its situation and its elevation. Can you tell us how that sort of works into the grapes you're growing and the way you farm?
It's true. We have the northern Rhône is very characteristic by Syrah. There's only one variety. When the southern Rhône is very characteristic with the tradition of the blending and the majority of Grenache. And in a way, the Ventoux, even if we're very much in the south, because we have a cool climate, because of the altitude, our mountain, the Ventoux mountain, which is nearly 2,000 meters high, creates a cooler climate that makes our little area the latest ripening area in the southern Rhône. So we're very much south, which means we have many varieties, a lot of Grenache. But because we're the coolest climate in the southern Rhône, we have indeed lots of common points with northern Rhône. First of all, we have a very large amount of Syrah. And we also have on the white side, Viognier and Roussanne, which are quintessentially northern Rhône varieties. So we like to think that we're that crossroad, that union point between northern Rhône and southern Rhône indeed.
Well, Fred, one of the things we covet in Canada, I think, is to have a history like you have in the region. So fascinating. Tell us a little bit about the origins, and you mentioned Châteauneuf-du-Pape. Tell us about that.
The history of wine growing and vine growing in the Rhône Valley is very, very ancient. It really starts a bit more than 2,000 years ago when the Roman and the Greeks really through Marseille brought vines to the area. And so the Rhône Valley being a corridor, it's also a major communication axe. And so it was the road through which everything transited. And so it is first, I think, because of that very strategic positioning that vine growing started 2,000 years ago. Then in the medieval times, there's a moment when it went down, and the popes, when they came from Rome to settle in Avignon for nearly a century, and that's in the 14th century, then they definitely increased and developed the wine growing in the area, and so yeah, it's both a kind of Roman and then the Catholic Church that influenced the destiny of winemaking for the Ventoux and for our area. And then progressively, we also had influence from Spain. The Garnacha, the Grenache came from there. We have our more indigenous varieties like Clairette, potentially Syrah, but for the Mourvèdre and the Grenache, they really came a few centuries ago from Spain.
You and your brother have taken the winery on a journey into organics and biodynamics. Can you explain a little bit how Pesquié works that way and where you're at today?
So, first of all, we have a climate and a terroir that really making us quite blessed, to move to organic or biodynamic. We have a lot of sun, we have a relatively dry climate, we have the Mistral, the northern wind that usually blows right after there is some rain. So we are in particularly great conditions to have a more ambitious type of farming. And so when we took over with my brother, it was kind of natural for us to move to organic. The first plots that we certified were in 2007, and we are now fully certified all the estate on organic practices. And we started in 2015 moving one step up with biodynamic practices, and we are now finalizing with Demeter a certification that should happen starting the vintage 2021. But it's been about 6 years now that the vineyards have been farmed biodynamically.
I want to talk about these three wines in Canada that sort of launched you, at least that we're seeing now more and more markets. To put it simply, the Rouge, the Blanc, and the Rosé. But this is sort of the heart of Château Pesquié. And I guess I wonder, like, when you wake up, you get into the business, was blending always what you would do, or would you consider not blending, and why the blends that you're using? How do these three wines come together to tell the story of Pesquié?
Well, the Tarsas range has definitely been an ambassador range for us. They are kind of global photography of the estate, might it be for the white, for the rosé, or for the red. But Terraces are basically really the embodiment of the tradition of blending grapes and blending terroir. So for the white Terraces, it's a blend of our 4 white varieties, Viognier, Roussanne, Clairette, and Grenache Blanc, mostly on limestone.
And super fresh, by the way, Fred. I just love this wine. I think it's a fantastic wine for us to have, to be able to drink here in Canada.
Well, the great microclimate of the Ventoux and the influence of the limestone, but we also try to be very careful in the winemaking to kind of support that natural freshness. On the rosé, it's 50% Cinsault, 40% Grenache, and 10% Syrah on sandy and limestone soils. So the idea here is really to capture finesse, brightness. The Cinsault is an incredible variety for that. With thin skin, little color, great acidity. So it's also a very crisp profile of rosé.
You're next door to Provence in some ways, not very far away. How would you compare this? Like, people maybe know a lot about Provence. What would you tell them about the Ventoux Rosé? Would you say it's quite close, or it seems to me like it has just a bit more guts, but I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly.
I think it's a good way to put it. We've had a very strong rosé tradition in the Ventoux, as in the rest of Provence. We're indeed at that crossroad. I like the idea of that same kind of crispy, fresh way to make rosé. It's direct press for the most part, but there's slightly more gastronomical. And why not just stick to? I like a rosé with a little bit more guts. Really, I don't find a better definition.
So gastronomic, you mean? So it's better with food, or it's made to be with food. Yeah.
It works as well. And on a porch for the aperitif. But
yeah, I want to talk about the Rouge. I think it's the wine that I have been drinking Pesquié now probably since about 2012, 2013. This red wine is it's really a treat to taste, and I don't know. I think my simplest explanation for this wine is the sort of umami character of it. It has a deliciousness that makes you want to drink the whole bottle. But tell us a bit about the blend and has it changed over the last 6 to 8 years?
There was a tiny change. The Syrah component has moved up a little bit, but it remains, really at the image of the estate. So it's about 60% of Grenache and 40% of Syrah. At some point, it was more like a 70-30. But, it is a little bit what we said before about Northern Rhône and Southern Rhône combined. There is a little bit of Cinsault, Carignan, Marcelin, Mourvèdre, all the varieties we work with. And it's that combination of the limestone, the blue marl, the sand, the clays, all combined. And that climate, that I think that kind of saltiness, that umami side you're mentioning is for me, first of all, because of that incredible cooler climate that we have in the Ventoux.
3 delicious wines. I want to talk a little bit about the specialty wines. Just before I do, I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but are you not the head of the Ventoux producers at the moment? How many of them are you, and how big is the Ventoux, and what are your sort of aspirations for that sub-region?
We're really building a stronger collective, and we're working all together right now on commitment on new and strong commitments for the environmental transition that we want to lead. There is still a minority of organic farming in the Ventoux. We want to move up to 25%, but we are finalizing our carbon footprint. There is a kind of network of weather station that we're building all together. We're working on replanting trees because there's 30,000 hectares of forest in the Ventoux. We have an incredible biosphere. We're in the middle of 2 natural parks. So it gives us a responsibility. And there's a great growing team feel in the AOC, and the common wish to take it really further in terms of quality, ambition. We really want to make the Ventoux the equivalent of some of the best cru of the Rhône Valley. We are so well equipped in that climate change moment with that, the influence of the mountain, that we feel we have a great advantage.
Okay, well, Pesquié has some flagship wines. Maybe you can take us up the ladder now, because many people who have discovered your wines, I think it's time for them to maybe understand these more complex wines that you're putting together. Tell us a little bit about these other wines that we will be seeing as time rolls out in Canada.
We have the Quintessence Rouge and the Quintessence White. Quintessence Rouge is a very Syrah-driven wine that is really a selection of clay and limestone plots. So it's probably one of the most powerful wines in the range. Still has, great balance, but a kind of darker fruit, a lot of spices. On the white Quintessence is more on the Roussanne side. It's 80 Roussanne and 20 Clairette. We also it's a more gastronomic white as well. More concentration on this wine, but still that kind of saltiness that is so inherent to the AOC. And then we have 4 single vineyards, 1 white that we have just released, and that is named after my little daughter that was born about a year ago, la cuvée Juliette. And then we have 3 single vineyards reds, one which is Artemia, which is definitely a kind of a floral, graphite, very northern Rhone style Syrah. We have Silica, which is a majority of Grenache with a little bit of Cinsault on sandy soil. So a very bright, apparently light, but in reality extremely dense expression of Grenache. And then we have Asensio, which is another expression of a vast majority of Grenache with a tiny bit of Syrah, which is definitely more massive. Even though there's no aging at all, I mean, there's no aging in oak. We do 2 years of aging in concrete with a little bit of whole cluster, but it shows all the concentration that some Grenache can actually reach. It gives you an idea of the general program that we have outside of the Terrasses range.
What's going to be the future at Pesquié? How do you see it?
Altitude is probably the key word. We definitely want to keep on going slightly higher and plant higher. We've been exploring new terroirs, and we're even looking outside of the Ventoux. But the real future, is the next generation. It's my brother has 2 boys. I have a boy and a girl. But among the 4 of them, the older is only 10. So we hope that some of them will keep on writing, in the long term, the story of Pesquié. Even though we feel we have quite a long way to go with my brother still to discover together.
Well, thanks. Maybe you can just let our friends know that they'll be able to visit you. We're all waiting to get vaccinated now.
Please come to our mountain, come to our vineyards. It's a beautiful place. We're very blessed in our area, and we'll be delighted to receive you at the winery and show you our vineyards and the way we work, and of course to have you tasting our wines.
Thanks again, Fred. It was great to catch up. Keep well.
Thank you very much.